Hello, and this is Sparta!
No, it's actually Camden.
And that's Ahmed, and welcome to Lonely Gamers.
Yay!
And Ahmed,
What?
what do we like?
Girls from video games. And how do we like them?
Oh yeah! For years, people have played video games with women in them, and although many men notice the unnecessarily skimpy clothing, most don't acknowledge the fact that many female characters are heavily sexualized, and that this repels a female audience.
Throughout my life as a gamer, I have always used it as my pastime and my passion. The fighting game genre was one of my favorites, but I've always been baffled on the female portrayal, whether it just be blatant skimpy clothing or the other features. Street Fighters, one of the most iconic fighting games that is world-renowned for its competitive gameplay. A personal favorite of mine. But to me, it's unfair to women. Every woman in this specific game has overly revealing clothing that is unpractical for fighting and really unnecessary. Poison is a great example of this. She wears a pair of short shorts, a sleeveless shirt, and a pair of cherry red heels. All of this doesn't really cover much of her. She also carries a whip, which is her weapon of choice. Really, Capcom. But there's more to her senile arsenal. Whenever she wins a fight, she almost completely exposes her chest, touches her legs, and lays down. Is this really needed to make a game about competition good? But Street Fighters isn't nearly as bad as my other examples. I thought, why not start with the soft stuff, then with the crazy unnecessary stuff?
Test your might. Test your might. Test your might. Test your might.
I'm ready.
Mortal Kombat 9, combat spelled with a K to be edgy, is also a world-renowned fighting game. Like all other games in this portion of the podcast. Mostly famous for its gory finishers that are very comical, yet gruesome. It was also the first fighting game that I picked up with my brother when I was all but 7, so I hold it close to my heart. But, as all games, it has its one flaw. The girls in this game are too sexualized. They all are in some way wearing the same thing, a leotard that doesn't leave much to the imagination. But 3 characters in this game I would like to talk about in particular are Shiva, Jade, and Melina. Jade in Mortal Kombat 9 is blatantly shown as a pole dancer, with her weapon of choice being a staff, which would be perfectly fine if she didn't dance on it every time she wins a game, wearing almost nothing. Shiva, on the other hand, is a masculine female who only wears strings to cover herself. Only strings.
That's hot.
As inhuman as she may look, she is still female, with very unrealistic proportions. Melina, on the other hand, is wearing a leotard with the middle cut out to expose her belly. However, Melina also has an alternative costume that is frankly more skimpy than the other one, and goes a little too far. In this costume, she wears nothing but bandages that only cover her quote-unquote essentials. Mortal Kombat is not a game about skimpy borderline nude characters. It's about beating your friends and pulling gruesome combos. Killer Instinct's Black Orchid takes all of this to an extreme. She wears a tight leotard with hot written across the side, with very clear meaning. Her portions are really unrealistic, almost no waist. But the really big giveaway that she's intended to act like how she is her finisher. Her finisher is her literally flashing her breast and killing people via the heart attack they get when they see the sight. But when you play as her against herself and do the finisher, she just gets really jealous and throws her weapons on the floor and stomps on the ground. This portrayal of women is untrue. But video game companies are not the only ones who do this. Newer mobile/smartphone game companies have also portrayed women in this way, such as Puzzles and Dragons, a game with almost 32 million downloads in Japan, according to the App Store. I would specifically like to mention Callie, a card that you can obtain in the game. She has an art. Like all the arts I have mentioned, they leave nothing to the imagination. This kind of portrayal of women is scaring them away from video game culture and certain genres, specifically the fighting game genre. Video games are meant for all, not just one gender, and appealing to only one gender in almost all AAA title fighting games is severely unfair to most women. The very essence of appealing to one gender is a bad cause. You effectively cut off half the population, which is a ton of people. Video games are the newest art form of the century. They give developers a platform to tell a story. This kind of innovative art shouldn't just be limited to the male gender. It should be for all. And for a start, we can stop with the overly skimpy clothing.
Throughout the history of gaming, we have seen huge varieties of games, from Pong to Call of Duty to Clash of Clans. But throughout the history of gaming, almost no games have been marketed to women above the age of 12 until the creation of mobile games. The few games that were marketed to young girls, outside of mobile games, were being limited to Barbie and educational games, while men and boys played games like Destiny, Minecraft, and Modern Warfare.
Since most women are often portrayed poorly and have very few video games marketed to them, you would think that women might not play many video games. But in actuality, over 47% of gamers in the United States are women.
Naturally, this is baffling, as one would think that placing women in ribbons as a form of clothing would be repulsive, but we find that girls naturally don't play fighting games that have these kinds of characters, but instead play story-based MMO games instead of action and combat-based PvP games with naked women, preferring a more social approach to the games they play compared to a man's competitive approach. Although many guys do play story-based MMOs and many women play combat-based PvP games, since the population of fighting games is primarily male, developers seem to like to add in these features because they appeal to men. Although many games that are played primarily by women, such as some dating sims or some MMOs, have features that appeal to women, none of these features include men in skin-tight underwear that doesn't leave many undefined qualities. Unfortunately, similarly to how women in video games aren't treated well, women who play video games aren't treated well either. We know that not everyone that plays video games hates women and wants to be mean to them, but obviously some people are mean towards women. This group that harasses girls that just want to have fun must have some motivation or reason to do this, and what we find is quite amusing.
A male player's skill level is directly inversely correlated with how negative they are toward women in an FPS.
Men that have a high ranking in the first-person shooter they play tend to act more positive towards the women they are playing with, while a low-ranking male is more likely to act negatively. Similarly, we find that the more times the player dies, the more times they make negative comments to anyone, and an extreme amount of deaths results in the player being more hostile to a male than a female, and only a few deaths result in a greater hostility towards females. On the other hand, a player with no kills is more likely to be hostile towards females, and a player with many kills is less likely to be hostile towards females, while both are equally hostile towards men. In general, poorly performing males are much more likely to be hostile towards females and act neutral to males. The researcher that conducted this experiment hypothesizes that this happens because gaming was a predominantly male group, and the intrusion of females endangers lower-ranked males of being even lower, while higher-ranked males have nothing to lose, all of which results in sexism in the gaming community because some guys are too afraid of being beaten by a girl. Since girls in video games are sexualized and girls who play video games are despised, we find an interesting combination of both when we look at professional women gamers. Although some girls that stream video games do try to market their looks instead of their gaming, such as legendary Leia, who has been banned from Twitch for inappropriate content, most female gamers don't. They simply play video games and accept donations, just like male gamers. Oddly enough, though, a girl wearing a tank top while slouching over her desk while playing a video game is too much, as shown by Shrine and I targeting out and harassing Storngate in World of Warcraft while watching her stream.
After a quick Twitch search, I found Purple Cat on December 14th, 2015 at 5:20 p.m. doing all three of the previously listed things: playing the same game, receiving no harassment for trying to attract women with his deep voice and large pecs.
I believe that it is safe to say that female pro gamers and streamers are being treated unfairly. In fact, most female streamers receive some sort of harassment for their appearance. In an interview, one female Twitch streamer said, "Harassment does happen in my stream from time to time that people start discussing my appearance." This particular streamer says it has happened multiple times to her, and later on in the interview she indicates that multiple female streamers deal with this on a regular basis, while almost no male streamers get harassed for their looks. Obviously, there's a huge difference between how different gendered streamers are treated, when both are just people trying to play games and make a bit of money off it, and neither is better or worse for being the gender they are. Since this is such a big issue, it seems illogical that it started in the first place, when in actuality, the way this problem started is the only reason we have video games today.
In 1983, hundreds of bad slopped together video games were being made. With so many consoles and bad video games, people lost interest, and with no console company for Braylink, all started to collapse.
This was only ended when the Nintendo created the NES and designed well-made video games targeted at males from ages 8 to 14. As more companies restarted and followed Nintendo's lead, the video game market developed into what it is today, targeted at males of all ages. Thanks, Nintendo.